Imagine a vast underground transit system. You walk down these standard tiled stairs, you hear the familiar rumble of the tracks, but
But you're not going to Brooklyn.
right, exactly. This train does not move you between physical cities. It doesn't take you from London to Paris. Instead, it transports you between states of being.
Which is just such a wild concept.
It really is. Like, you could catch the 7.15 Express from Waking to Dream,
Mm.
or maybe you find yourself stuck on the local line, the one that makes every single agonizing stop between certainty and doubt.
Yeah, it's a stunning, incredibly visceral metaphor from our source files today.
Yeah.
You board a train, hand over your ticket, and a sprawling metaphysical system physically transports you to a defined psychological destination.
Exactly. So welcome everyone to today's Duck Dive. We are jumping right into this extraordinary set of source materials detailing the Liminal Transit Authority.
It's quite the trip.
Literally. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore how massive systems process or manage and sometimes entirely erase complex human emotions.
Right. What happens when human pain doesn't fit neatly onto a printed transit map?
Yes, and ultimately we're going to uncover the radical, world-altering power of simply remaining with someone in their pain.
And to really get to the heart of how this authority operates, we we had to bypass all the standard routes. We're boarding the most complex, unpredictable route in this entire transit system.
The nowhere line.
Yes, the nowhere line, a route that actually doesn't have a set destination at all.
So let's unpack the mechanics of this world for you. We experience all of this through our protagonist. It's a new conductor named Kai.
Right. Who has essentially fled the real world,
Yeah.
signed a mountain of bureaucratic paperwork, and become a liminal transit worker.
Yeah. And almost immediately, Kai gets assigned to the nowhere line. Now, in a system built entirely around getting people from point A to point B, why is this specific route so completely weird?
Well, the defining feature of the civilian lines in this universe is the promise of forward motion. Like, if you get on a standard train, you know exactly where you're leaving from.
And the authority knows exactly where you're arriving.
Exactly. But the nowhere line operates, as the text describes it, ahead of definition. It travels to places that are unformed.
Places that are actively dissolving, right?
Yeah, or states of being that simply aren't officially recognized on any map. It's kind of the transit equivalent of going off-road into the wilderness of the human psyche.
And the physical environment outside the train windows reflects that total lack of definition. It isn't passing through physical darkness or tunnels or daylight. The sources describe the medium outside the train as the between light.
The between light. Such a great phrase.
It is. But the sources also throw around phrases like ontological density, which sounds like something straight out of a graduate philosophy seminar.
It really does.
So if I'm driving a train through that, what am I actually seeing out the window?
Well, you aren't seeing physical fog or rain. You're seeing the literal weight of human identity in flux.
Huh.
The between light doesn't illuminate physical surfaces.
Ow. It eliminates conditions?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if the train is carrying passengers who are going through massive complex crises of self, the between light outside the train window actually thickens.
Wow.
It might change color, turn a bruised purple, or become a dense, suffocating gray based on the emotional gravity of the route. The train is moving through the physical manifestation of unresolved states.
So it's almost like driving a car through a thick atmospheric cloud of someone's existential dread.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
Yeah.
And because the environment is so reactive, the authority can't just put anyone behind the controls.
Right.
The nowhere line selects its conductors for a very specific psychological trait, which is a high tolerance for unresolved states.
I love that phrase so much, tolerance for unresolved states. Because if you think about modern transit in our own lives, it is purely transactional. You pay a fare and you expect absolute destination confidence.
Yeah, you want to be displaced from point A to point B with maximum efficiency.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Kai is chosen because Kai possesses the rare ability to just sit in the not knowing without immediately demanding a fix or a destination.
Which is incredibly hard. Most people can only tolerate uncertainty if they believe a clear resolution is waiting for them at the end of it. but Kai can exist in permanent uncertainty.
And that's vital for the nowhere line, right?
It's absolutely vital. Conductors have to learn to trust the train itself because the train has its own kind of environmental consciousness.
But the core tension of this entire story is that trusting the systemic flow of the train doesn't mean abdicating your own personal responsibility to the passengers.
Right.
Which perfectly sets up the central conflict here, because this massive, swirling uncertainty is exactly where Kai encounters a passenger who has, well, completely fallen through the cracks.
Maren.
Yes, Kai meets Maren. She deliberately sits in the last seat of the last car, and she has been riding this train to nowhere for 17 years.
17 years. Just imagine that.
It's crazy. And when Kai checks her ticket, the origin and the destination both read the exact same thing. Discontinued, states 7 Nile.
The image of a passenger whose home has been legally unmapped is just profound. She's essentially a refugee of the system's own bureaucracy.
So Maren explains to Kai that state 7 Nile wasn't a physical place. It was a state of being called witnessed grief.
And this is a crucial distinction.
Yeah, I want to pause here because the sources draw a very sharp, deliberate line between witnessed grief and mourning. They are absolutely not the same thing in this universe.
Far from it. In the Liminal Transit Authority, mourning is a highly established, fully mapped state. It has reliable stations. It has clear substates like loss and memory.
Like standard stops on a subway line.
Exactly. And crucially, it operates as a solitary journey toward a final destination called acceptance.
Right.
Think of mourning like a moving walkway at an airport. You step on it, you process your feelings, and it efficiently delivers you to a resolution. You can do it completely alone.
But witnessed grief breaks that entire model.
Completely. Witnessed grief requires relational infrastructure. It fundamentally requires a second person.
Because you can't be witnessed if there's no witness.
Exactly. It's the specific condition of having someone else be completely present to your loss without them trying to fix it, manage it, or, rush you through some predetermined timeline of recovery.
It isn't about moving forward. It's about being held in the present moment by another human being.
Right.
Wait, I'm stuck on this. If witnessed grief is essentially the profound act of someone holding space for your pain, which sounds incredibly healing, why would a transit system, an entity designed to serve passengers, want to erase that destination?
That feels counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, it feels almost cruel.
Well, it comes down to the brutal logic of resource management. The Continuity Board, that's the governing body of the authority, deems State 7 Nile 2 resource intensive for the passenger volume it served.
Oh, of course. The bottom line.
Right. Maintaining the connection between two people in a stationary emotional space lacked scale. The system prefers states that can be completed alone. Self-sufficient grief, individual integration.
Because they're simply more manageable to track and process.
Exactly.
If you're hearing this and thinking, well, a massive system kind of has to prioritize efficiency and scalability, you're not wrong.
No, it's a fair point to play devil's advocate on.
Right. We see this in our own lives constantly. You can't mass-produce deeply personal, two-person holding spaces in a massive global corporation. Think about how modern workplaces handle grief. Bereavement leave is typically, 3 to 5 days?
If you're lucky.
Yeah. The system gives you a very tight, solitary window to process your loss efficiently and then expects you to integrate back into the workflow. Our own society silently asks us to process our struggles quickly and alone.
The parallel is impossible to ignore. But this raises the ultimate question about what happens when an institution demands that kind of cold efficiency. The human need doesn't just vanish because the system stopped tracking it.
The map changes, but the territory remains.
Yes. And Maren is the living proof of that. The state of witness grief was legally erased, but Maren, the passenger who needed it, remained on the train.
Okay, but if this system is actively erasing places people desperately need to go, the actual conductors driving the trains have to be seeing the fallout every single day. How do they not just completely break down under the psychological weight of all that unaddressed pain?
They develop armor. And the sources give us a perfect example of this through a veteran conductor named Sonder.
Sonder, he's Kai's mentor, right?
Yeah. Sonder's been working the Nowhere line for 11 years. He knows Maren has been riding the train for 17 years. And the way Sonder survives, seeing that orphan pain every day, is through a practice he calls functional distance.
Functional distance. It sounds so clinical.
It is. It's the deliberate practice of paying very close attention to a passenger situation without ever collapsing into it.
So he sees them, but keeps a wall up.
Right. Sonder genuinely cares about the passengers, but firmly believes that fixing the fundamental structural flaws of the system is above his pay grade. He maintains that professional boundary to protect his own sanity.
And it isn't just the workers who use armor. The authority as a sprawling institution has its own incredibly insidious armor, which is its language. Maren points out that the authority never uses accurate words for what they do.
No, they use what they call functional equivalence.
Yeah.
The language of the institution is meticulously designed to mask the harm it causes.
Like what?
For example, they use the term discontinuation instead of erasure or forgetting.
Yeah.
When they destroy a passenger's home state, they don't say they destroyed it, they offer residential rehousing.
Wow. Which is such a polite, sterile, bureaucratic way of telling someone that their specific emotional origins no longer matter and they should just accept a generic substitute.
It's chilling.
It's the exact same psychological trick as corporate jargon in our world. A company will say they're implementing a strategic downsizing or a workforce realignment instead of admitting they're firing thousands of people who rely on those paychecks.
Exactly. It strips the humanity and the blood right out of the action.
But let me ask you, is Saunders' functional distance really just a necessary boundary to survive a grueling job? Or is it actually a failure of responsibility? Does it just protect the system from ever having to answer hard questions?
That's the big question. And Sonder himself wrestles with this later in the text. He admits that functional distance was a highly defensible professional position, but ultimately a moral failing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, by refusing to cross that boundary, by refusing to make the passenger's systemic problems his own, Sonder basically ensured that the system could continue humming along uninterrupted.
But Kai discovers that there is a counter-narrative hiding within the authority.
Yes, the rogue library.
I love this part. Kai finds this unauthorized collection of texts filled with marginalia from a past conductor named Rowe. And Rowe left behind this brilliant, subversive definition of unauthorized infrastructure.
Rowe wrote, and this is a direct quote, "A phantom station is the system telling you where it hurts."
A phantom station is the system telling you where it hurts. That is just so incredibly poignant.
It perfectly captures the mechanics of this world. When the official map fails to serve a genuine, bleeding human need, the system itself begins to ache.
It's like a symptom of a disease.
Exactly. The pressure builds up, and unauthorized spaces naturally start to form in the margins. It's a biological response to an institutional failure. And reading that makes Kai realize that Saunders' functional distance isn't the only way to operate.
Right. Kai refuses to put on that psychological armor. Instead, Kai and Maren realize that they can use the system's own physics against it. Maren reveals something about the between light that changes everything.
She reveals that for 17 years, the between light hasn't just been passively swirling around her like dead air. It has been actively absorbing and carrying the blueprint of witnessed grief.
Wait, how does an environment hold the memory of an emotion?
Because the between light responds to ontological density. It is highly attentive to genuine, unmet need. The ambient air of the system literally remembers what the authority tried to bureaucratically forget.
Because the unexpressed need for witness grief was so heavy, so dense, that it permanently altered the texture of the space Maren was traveling through.
Exactly. And knowing this, Kai takes the ultimate risk.
Right in the middle of a route.
Yeah, surrounded by this gathering, thickening, memory-heavy between light, Kai just stops the train.
Which is an act of total rebellion. And right there, in the middle of the trackless void, Kai and Maren pull the blueprint from the between light and build a new, unmapped, unauthorized station. They name it the Station of Abiding.
The Station of Abiding.
Let's really dig into that word. Why abiding?
Well, based on the etymology provided in the sources, to abide means to remain, to wait, to dwell, and to tolerate.
To tolerate.
The physical architecture of this phantom station is quite literally constructed out of a prior decision. The decision that the grief of another person is worth the time it takes to sit with them.
Think about how radically different that is from the rest of the transit map. The rest of the system is about moving you along, getting you processed, getting you to acceptance.
As fast as possible.
Right. But the Station of Abiding has no forward momentum. It is a quiet, stubborn protest of absolute presence.
Exactly.
Like, think about a time in your own life when everything was falling apart and you just needed a friend to sit on the couch with you. You didn't want them to offer solutions or tell you it was going to be okay or give you a timeline for when you'd feel better.
You just needed them to stay.
Yes, you just need them to stay. In the world of this story, Offering that kind of staying power is a literal architectural act of world building.
And the construction of that station is fueled by a very specific, potent emotion. Maren describes it as the anger of the witnessed.
The anger of the
Yeah,
witnessed.
it's a very clean, highly motivating anger that comes from knowing exactly what true, deep witnessing feels like, and then waking up to the realization that you live in a world structurally designed to prevent it from happening.
It's the anger that says, my pain is necessary, it is real, and I refuse to let it be erased for the sake of your efficiency.
Exactly.
But you can't just build an unauthorized metaphysical train station in a massive interconnected bureaucracy without tripping some alarms. The system is constantly monitoring itself, and sure enough, the audit comes.
Oh, yeah. This introduces us to Ferox.
Ferox.
Ferox is a highly procedural auditor for the authority. The source text described Ferox as being more function than flesh.
Ouch.
I know, right? This is a professional who operates entirely within the strict grammar of institutional process, evidence, and rules. Ferox isn't cruel, really. Ferox is just pure protocol.
So Ferox arrives to conduct a survey run on the Nowhere line, holding this tablet that is tracking all the unauthorized anomalies. And as the train approaches the station of abiding, Maren steps up. She doesn't hide. She argues her case directly to the auditor.
And Maren's argument is brilliant because she doesn't appeal to emotion. She appeals to the authority's own internal logic.
How so?
She argues to Ferox that the station of abiding is not an attempt to recreate the massive, sprawling, dead state Seven Nile. It is simply a highly localized, singular point providing a location for a practice that the authority failed to fully erase.
Oh, that's clever.
Right? The need still exists in the system, the passenger is still standing here holding the ticket, and therefore the station is a localized correction to an institutional error, not a violation of the map.
It's a phenomenal argument. And here we get what I think is the most cinematic, profound moment in the entire set of sources. Ferox is listening to Maren. The train pulls up to this glowing, unauthorized station built out of pure empathy, and Ferox actually sets down the auditing tablet.
Sets it down. It is a complete break-in protocol for someone who is more function than flesh.
Yeah.
But Ferox sets the tablet down because of a deeply hidden personal connection to this exact issue. The sources reveal that decades ago, at age 23, Ferox was the junior staffer who physically formatted and distributed the original discontinuation order for State 7 Nile.
Wow. Wait, really? So Ferox was the one who pushed the button?
Exactly. They processed the paperwork with the blind efficiency of youth, totally failing to understand the human reality of what they were erasing.
That is heartbreaking.
It was only much later in life, after experiencing a profound, devastating personal loss of their own, that Ferox finally understood the weight of witness grief. They learned exactly what that piece of paperwork had destroyed.
So faced with Maren and faced with the station,
Yeah.
what does Ferox do? Ferox goes back to headquarters and writes a massive 47-code report on the anomaly.
But Ferox refuses to use the authority's polite, sterile, functional equivalents.
Right. Ferox refuses to call it a rehousing error or a discontinuation anomaly. Ferox uses the accurate words. In the official audit, Ferox calls the erasure of the state institutional forgetting.
And the impact of those accurate words cannot be overstated here. Systems, at their core, operate entirely on the data they are fed. If you feed a system sanitized language, it will produce sanitized harm over and over again.
But when Ferox forces the unvarnished, painful truth into the official record, it literally changes the institutional reality.
It does. The Continuity Board, which is led by this fascinating, enigmatic figure simply named Between, is forced to review this unvarnished report.
And because Kai stopped the train, because Maren argued her case, and because Ferox bravely refused to use the sanitized jargon, the board has to look at the human cost in plain text. And they ultimately vote to grant the Station of Abiding Provisional Registry. They don't destroy it, they put it on the map.
It is a monumental victory. It might be small in physical scale, just one station on the Nowhere line, but it is massive in its systemic implications. The practice of witness grief is officially allowed to exist again.
So let's summarize the aftermath of this incredible story. Maren, after 17 years of riding a train through the void, finally has a home. Sonder, the veteran mentor, officially takes over as the primary conductor of the Nowhere line.
And inspired by Kai, Sonder finally drops the armor of functional distance and chooses to truly engage with the passenger's pain, no matter how messy it gets.
And Kai's bravery doesn't go unnoticed either. Kai transitions out of the conductor role and into a newly created position within the authority, the advocate.
Yes, Kai's entire job now is to scour the between light across the whole system, looking for the lingering patterns of other forgotten emotional states.
Kai is officially tasked with using the accurate words to build stations for all the needs that the system left behind.
It brings all these themes together perfectly. The friction between scale and humanity, the power of unvarnished language, and the courage it takes to just sit in the dark with someone.
And, you don't need a metaphysical subterranean transit system to practice what we've talked about today.
You really don't. The practice of remaining is incredibly difficult in our own lives because, just like the authority, our world heavily values efficiency over presence.
Yeah.
But deciding that another person's grief is worth your time without trying to fix them or rush them is perhaps the most radical healing thing you can offer.
To create a station of abiding in your own life, it just takes two people. One person willing to speak their unvarnished truth, and one person willing to simply remain. No fixing, just staying.
Exactly.
Which leaves us with a final question for you to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. Think about your own internal landscape. What discontinued state or unmapped need is currently being carried in your own personal between light?
That's a great question.
Perhaps there's a part of yourself, a past version of you, or a difficult relationship that you've tried to process a little too efficiently. You told yourself to just get over it, to get to acceptance as fast as possible. What if that unmet need isn't something to be fixed, but is just waiting for you to stop the train, drop the armor, and finally build a station for it?